Hello, Carrie Burchill here with another episode of Shine Like a North Star to help people respond to current events that they're facing in their leadership. Now, leaders I define as anyone that has influence in the community, the church group, the family, the world of organizations and companies. So, if you're watching, you are an influencer. Today, we're going to talk about a pervasive question which really centers on this idea of speaking up. I was doing a keynote speech recently for a university, and they had come to me at break, a couple of people, and said, I love what you're saying, Carrie, but we're afraid to speak up. And that idea of being afraid to advocate for yourself, contribute problem-solving ideas, decision-making, all of that stuff is tied up in this comfort of speaking up. And when we have a pervasive culture where people are afraid to speak up, it really begs the question, how come? What gets in the way of you speaking up? So that's what we're going to dive into today, really looking at that culture that many of us feel. Could be in a social circle, out for dinner with friends. It could be at a setting like this client was talking to me about, where historically there had been some instances where it was not welcome to speak up. And despite changes, people still feel this reluctance to speak up. So let's break it down into a couple of things. First off, one thing to sort of consider is fear. Fear is a really pervasive idea that stops us from speaking up. And we can have fear of retaliation. We could have fear around how our message is going to be received, or maybe more personally, how I'm going to be received sharing this message. Just this morning, I was talking with another group of leaders where they were in a situation where they were presenting to other stakeholders in the organization, and the stakeholders were peppering them with questions. And we talked about drawing boundaries with those stakeholders that were peppering with questions. And part of the reluctance to sort of speak up, or more importantly, speak back to these stakeholders that were not being overly respectful, was the worry and fear about opening up Pandora's box. Like, if I speak up and advocate or draw some boundaries or anything that sort of feels a little bit safer, the fear is that I'm opening Pandora's box and I'm just going to get flooded with more poison from that person. So fear is a real contender with what gets in the way of us speaking up. Another thing to consider is shame. Shame is that feeling that we have when we have disappointment, we have regret, we have wish I could have done that differently, or a redo, beep, 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 back up, do it again. So shame can also overarch our willingness to speak up. Sometimes we have shame from past experiences that we are applying to the present. And so shame becomes an overarching in all of our works, even though it really needs to be processed around a certain experience. We paint everything with that cloud of shame. So fear and shame are factors that lead into our fear of speaking up. And the last thing that really gets in the way is what I call the ego monster, right? That idea that we really want to be great. And the ego monster is going to be that evil twin on our shoulder that tells us we're not great, we're not successful, we're not enough, we are better in the shadows, don't have anything to contribute. And that ego monster talking louder and louder gets in the way of us speaking up. So my challenge with all of you is to first sort of recognize what is fueling your fear of speaking up. Is it the fear of speaking up because of all the consequences that may come with that? Is it a shame where there's going to be more disappointment, more internal struggle around whatever you might say, whatever the response is to what you might say? Or is it the evil twin on your shoulder, that messaging and story that just depletes your contribution? Now, the first thing when we sort of talk about overcoming the fear of speaking up is to really just recognize what is fueling that fear of speaking up. So I want you to do some reflection and think about if it's fear, if it's shame, if it's an ego monster. And arguably, shame is going to fuel the fear, and the fear is going to fuel the ego monster, or vice versa. The ego monster fuels fear and shame. It's all tied up. What you want to do is just put words on what is fueling that fear of speaking up. And my next week's video will really dive into some strategies once you identify what is fueling that fear of speaking up. Now, arguably, when we speak up, you're going to feel so much lighter. You're going to feel empowered to have your voice heard, contribute. You're going to feel more proud of the work that you're doing because it's representative of what you think and what you know to be right. So this work is heady and introspective and worth it. So come along with me. Let's embrace the light that you shine and help you be your best so that you can shine like a North Star. I'm Carrie Burchell, and I would love for you to connect with me. You can find me at carrieburchell.com. You can certainly Google me in social platforms. I would love to be a part of your journey. I offer complimentary coaching sessions with people just to slow down together and really drive how you can shine like a North Star. Let's be in touch.